Welcome to this explainer. When you look up and see a drone just hovering effortlessly in the sky, it's really easy to assume it's just some kind of modern magic. But the reality? It's actually far more fascinating. Flight isn't just a passive state. It is a continuous, highly dynamic battle of physical forces happening all around the aircraft every single second it's airborne.
Seriously, I want you to ask yourself, how exactly does a heavy, dense mix of plastic, metal, and lithium batteries manage to just elegantly and reliably defy gravity? To really understand drone design, operation, and efficiency, we first have to conquer the invisible battlefield of the sky. We've got to map out the forces at play and figure out how to bend them to our advantage. Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to explore the invisible science of flight, break down the 4 fundamental flight forces, and master multi-rotor lift principles. From there, we'll analyze the power of propeller design, and finally, look at conquering the flying environment. We are literally building our understanding straight from the air itself.
Starting off with Section 1, the invisible science of flight. At its core, this entire field really just comes down to aerodynamics, how air behaves as it actively flows around the drone. Drones rely on a balanced interaction of aerodynamic forces to achieve and maintain flight. I really want to emphasize that word balanced. Flight isn't just science happening in a vacuum. It's a literal constant tug-of-war between opposing physical forces. If that balance breaks, well, the drone falls. Proper aerodynamic design is the absolutely crucial foundation for ensuring efficient flights, extended battery life, and true stability.
Moving right along to Section 2, 4 fundamental flight forces. It is time to introduce the specific combatants on our invisible battlefield.
And this brilliantly illustrates the primary rivalries. Any flying object is subjected to 4 major forces in a constant tug-of-war. Lift battles weight, while thrust battles drag. For a drone to actually stay airborne and maneuverable, lift has to constantly defeat weight, and thrust must overcome drag. Let's break these matchups down.
In our first battle, we have lift versus weight. Lift, which is that upward force generated by the rapid rotation of the propellers, must counteract weight, the downward pull of gravity acting on the frame, the motors, the batteries, the whole shebang. Balancing these two is everything. If lift is too low, your drone is permanently grounded. But if the lift force is too high and you don't manage it, the drone is going to ascend completely out of control. That's why designers are constantly fighting to keep the overall weight down without sacrificing structural strength.
Our second battle is thrust versus drag. Thrust is the propulsion pushing the drone where you want it to go, vertically or horizontally. But fighting right back is drag, which is the air resistance trying to slow it down. Now, drag is a tricky enemy because it comes in 2 flavors. You've got parasitic drag, caused just by the physical shape of the drone bumping into the air, and then there's induced drag, which is actually an unavoidable byproduct of generating lift itself. It's a total catch-22. You want maximum thrust with minimum energy use, meaning you have to design the drone to slice through that drag.
Which brings us to Section 3, mastering multi-rotor lift principles. Now that we know who's fighting out there, let's look at the weapons we use to tip the scales and generate that upward force.
We rely heavily on 2 core principles of physics. First up is Bernoulli's principle. When a propeller spins, its specific, curved airfoil shape makes the air flow faster over the top of the blade than underneath it. This speed difference creates a low pressure area, essentially a vacuum, right above the blade. And that vacuum physically pulls the propeller, and the drone attached to it, skyward.
Let's see how this builds directly into our second weapon, Newton's third law of motion. You know this one. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. As the propellers spin, they are aggressively pushing a massive volume of air downwards. Because the drone shoves the air down, the air shoves back, forcing the drone up. So between Bernoulli's low-pressure pull and Newton's reactive push, we've got lift.
But generating lift has a really delicate threshold, dictated by the angle of attack. This is simply the angle at which the propeller blade slices into the incoming air. A higher angle pushes more air, giving you more lift, up to a point. The crucial detail here is that if you push that angle too far, the smooth airflow physically separates from the blade. This triggers an aerodynamic stall. Lift drops instantly. And if your multi-rotor stalls, there's no gliding. It drops right out of the sky.
On to Section 4, the power of propeller design. With the physics all mapped out, let's take a look at the actual hardware doing the heavy lifting.
The easiest and, frankly, the coolest way to understand propellers is to think of them as spinning wings. Unlike an airplane that has to hurl itself forward horizontally to force air over its wings, multi-rotor drones achieve lift by just spinning multiple rotor blades vertically in place. Their specific shape, pitch, and size completely dictate how much air they can move. Now, what's really interesting about this is how clearly it maps out the trade-offs engineers have to make. If you slap large, high-pitched propellers on your drone, you're going to generate massive lift, absolutely. But it comes at the steep cost of a super high power drain on your battery. On the flip side, small, low-pitch props don't give you as much lift, but they're way more energy efficient. Matching the exact right propeller to your drone's specific weight and mission is literally the only way to avoid killing your battery in 5 minutes.
So how do we control all those spinning wings? Well, a drone stability is all about incredibly precise control of lift across its different rotors. To maneuver, to pitch, yaw, or roll, the onboard flight controller is constantly tweaking the speed of the individual motors. It takes live data from gyroscopes and accelerometers to instantly speed up or slow down specific propellers. It's balancing those aerodynamic forces in real time to keep the drone perfectly stable.
Finally, Section 5. Conquering the flying environment. Up until now, we've kind of been talking about a perfect static world, but the real sky, it's messy, and the environment is actively trying to ruin your efficiency.
Let's meet the environmental enemies of flight: strong winds, high altitude, extreme heat, and rain. Basically, Mother Nature's anti-drone task force. These aren't just minor inconveniences out there. They are active enemies that directly interfere with your aerodynamic efficiency and your motor function. To put that into perspective, let's focus on air density, because this explains exactly why the environment matters so much for real-world operations. Both high altitudes and hot temperatures cause air density to drop. Thinner air literally means there is less mass for your propellers to push against. So if you're flying on a blazing hot summer day high up in the mountains, your propellers have to spin much, much faster just to achieve basic hover. Your motors are working overtime, which is exactly why your battery drains so incredibly fast in those conditions.
So how did designers fight back against all this? Through strict aerodynamic optimization. Step 1. Streamline the frame. They use lightweight materials and fairings to drastically cut down that parasitic drag. Step 2. Mathematically match the battery power to the propeller specs, so absolutely no energy is wasted. And Step 3 is rigorous testing. Engineers mount these drones on specialized thrust stands to accurately measure lift forces at different motor speeds, refining the whole physical design long before it ever hits the open sky.
When you're tackling these aerodynamic challenges, form always follows function. Multi-rotor drones are incredibly agile. They can hover, they take off vertically, they're great. But the trade-off is high energy usage because they are constantly expending huge amounts of power just to stay in the air. Fixed-wing drones, on the other hand, look like airplanes, and they trade that hovering ability for pure efficiency. Because they rely on forward motion to glide on their wings, they use way less energy, making them the go-to for long-distance surveillance or mapping.
And that brings us to our final thought for today. We've successfully mapped out the invisible battlefield of the sky. You now understand the intricate tug-of-war between lift, weight, thrust, and drag, and exactly how propeller physics and the environment tip those scales. The physics are no longer a mystery to you. So the question is, armed with this aerodynamic knowledge, how will you design your next drone to conquer those forces? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I can't wait to see how you take to the skies.